1, 2, 3, 4. I gave you all I had to give, and I've done the best I can. So now it's up to you to finish what I began. Yes, I will always love you, and I'll be there just for you. So in all that you do, my child, to yourself you must be true. So promise me that you will fight for what it is that you believe. No matter what you do in life, it's in the giving that you'll receive. Wherever the road may take you, those you meet along the way, promise me that you will count your blessings every day.
And a very good night or a very good day to you whenever you happen to catch this. Jason Hawes back once again on American Faith Today. And it has been a little while since the last podcast, which unfortunately at times has been the rule rather than the exception. But sometimes, as happens in my life, as in all of our lives, there are other things that come up or other things that become a priority or take priority over some of the other things that perhaps we would like to do. Sunday's actually my day off, but this past Sunday, just as I'm recording this, it was 2 days ago. Even though that was my day off, it was actually very busy for me. But anyway, I am glad to be back here and still working our way towards the end of this great book of Daniel. And certainly we'll finish up the 11th chapter tonight on this podcast. If at all possible, I may be able to squeeze in the 12th chapter as well. I don't know. We are talking about 35 or so, 35, 36 verses of the Bible or something like that in that vicinity. So we'll see how it goes, but certainly should make our way through the 11th chapter and can move perhaps a little bit quicker as there's really not a whole lot of, there will be some explaining and some interpreting, but not a whole lot of going through, as we did in the last podcast, going through historical events and trying to connect how they line up with the prophecy here in the book of Daniel. Everything from this point on is yet future to us and not things that have happened as of yet. But we'll see how it goes. If we make it through the entire remainder of the book, that's fine. If not, then we'll get into the 12th chapter in the next podcast, which again is a very short chapter, so if anything, maybe a little bit of review and wrap up just to fill the time. But picking it up now in our Father's Word in, again, Daniel chapter 11, we're about halfway through, just over halfway through this 11th chapter. And even though it wasn't intentional, it wound up being a relatively good stopping point because we basically got, again, through the historical prophecy to us, and have now come upon the arrival of Antichrist, of Satan as Antichrist. And that happened actually a couple of verses up from where we stopped in the 21st verse, where we had the vile person coming in to power, coming into the estate of the raiser of taxes in that same office, and that vile person, of course, being a title for the Antichrist. And again, how does he come in? How does he come on the scene? Peaceably and obtaining the kingdom by flatteries, which, as I mentioned in the last podcast, you look up this word flatteries in a Strong's Concordance, and you can even make a connection to his own children, to the Kenites, and to that mark of the beast when we talk about, as it will show in the Hebrew, if you look it up in a Strong's Concordance. In fact, I'll go there quickly because I don't want to leave you wanting. in Daniel chapter 11, verse 21, the word flatteries, and I'll try not to butcher the pronunciation, kalak lakal, meaning properly something very smooth. And again, those who, as I mentioned, those who are familiar with count the mark of the beast from Revelation chapter 13 and count the 666, that in the Greek you'll find that this count referring to counting stones worn smooth over a long period of time. And again, for many of us who have had the fortune of some great teaching and or some serious study on our own part, have come to identify that and have come to recognize that as keeping track of and keeping a count or account of the false Jews, the tares, the Kenites, those of the synagogue of Satan, as you'll find them in this same Word of God. But also in the last verse, in the 23rd verse, which is where we left off again, you will find that he comes up and shall become strong with a small people. And again, this is where I left off. In this small people, when you look up people in the Hebrew, it is Hebrew word 1471, and it is goi. And you will find right off the bat, if you have a Strong's Concordance, that it is sometimes, it says rarely, but it is shortened sometime as goy. And as I mentioned, these same people, as I believe, referred to actually what they referred to as Gentiles, which quite honestly in many cases is those of the true house of Israel and of the 10 northern tribes, but they refer to them in an insulting, condescending, derogatory manner as goy or goyim. And yet, if we go to our Father's Word, it is actually they who are the goy. Again, the word is actually goi, but it is sometimes shortened as goy. It refers to a foreign nation. Actually, it says here a Gentile. Figuratively, a troop of animals, and most relevantly, a flight of locusts. Gentile, heathen, nation, people. So, but that gives you an idea of just who supports him and who brings him into power. It is that, he will actually come and unleash the locust army, which once he arrives will be supernatural. But it is his children, it is the Kenites, it is the tares that bring him into power and that help prop up his rule, so to speak, along with the fallen angels and the 10 supernatural kings that he will set up that are part of those fallen angels that are booted out of heaven by Michael and booted out onto earth at that given time. But anyway, picking up again in Daniel chapter 11, and we're going to start with verse 24, and it reads, He, this again referring to Antichrist, he shall enter peaceably, even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil, and riches, yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. Now, when it talks about scattering among them the prey, the spoil, and the riches, this, in my opinion, refers to out-and-out socialism, if you will. It refers to, in political talk or political verbiage of today, it refers to trying to make sure that everybody gets an equal outcome, or that the wealth, so to speak, is divided. In old school talk, or going back to the FDR days, he'll make sure that there's a chicken in every pot. And again, once he comes, he will offer everyone and anyone who will listen to him. He'll offer me, he will offer you, he will offer everyone whatever the price is that they would put on their very soul. Hopefully you, of course, consider your soul to be something that is priceless and can't be bought, especially by somebody who will, during that time, be able to keep his promise for a time. But again, as I kind of like the comparison that has been made here by one or two other commentators, that we go back into this same book of Daniel, and when you had Belteshazzar, who was basically the last Babylonian king, the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, he made some promises to Daniel that if he could interpret the writing on the wall from God's hand, that he would reward him with riches and with a position in the kingdom, a position that, quite frankly, he already had. It was within the power of Belteshazzar, of course, as king to do that, but yet he would die that very night. So, while he did have the power to do that, the promise really didn't amount to much because he wouldn't be in power for very long. Same with Antichrist. But in any event, he will be a socialist of the highest order. I certainly believe. Verse 25. And he shall stir up his power, again, this being Antichrist, and his courage against the king of the south with a great army. That, in part, is the army that he brings with him, his army of fallen angels. That, in part, is his children here on earth. That also becomes, even unfortunately, Christians who are deceived into believing that the first Christ who shows up is the true one. But, again, with a great army, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. Now, again, let's try to keep this in context here. Go back to verse 21. How does he come on the scene? Peaceably. He will come on the scene promising peace. He will come on the scene promising prosperity. And again, as far as it goes, some of it will no doubt be, much of it will be through deception. But as far as it goes, during that time that he's allowed to rule in that position, again, he will be able to deliver. But once again, hopefully your soul is priceless to you, because it will be for a very short time. I believe specifically 2.5 months, a shortened time, even from 7 years or 3.5 years to 2.5 months, that he will be able to offer anyone who would listen to him anything. But because he comes in peaceably, we're not talking so much about a military battle here. The war of the end times, the war of the tribulation, while there will be a time at the tail end in which you will likely have armed forces marching, even I believe, against this country, the United States, and as well as against Jerusalem. But for most of that time, it won't be military forces and armies lined up against one another. It will be a spiritual battle of ideas and a spiritual war that takes place. And I suppose it would only be natural that the pride of man, in the flesh in particular, and the pride, no doubt, of some of the rulers of various nations would perhaps be in the beginning resistant into ceding their power and their influence to one ruler. And so it is, but it will happen that basically every country is swallowed up into Satan's one world system, the one world system of Satan, of his angels, of the Kenites, of the globalist. It will certainly happen, and we will see in the very next verse one reason why it will happen, even with this king of the south, who would as we would be led to believe here, would be ready to go to battle against